All right, welcome everybody. My name is Brian, and today I am comparing the OX box, which we all know and love, against its little brother, the OX Stomp here. This one would cost, the OX box is about $1,500 new, and this little guy is about $400 new, which I paid $400 for it from Sweetwater. And I got this OX box used on Reverb for about $775. Pretty good deal I got. Here are the rules. One, I'm using a Fender Princeton. It's down there. The Fender Princeton is going to go through the Torpedo Captor 8 as the load box to go into the OX Stomp, but the OX box has its own load box. I'm only comparing rig settings that are on these machines. I'm not going to go into the app. And because some of these rig settings have reverb or delay on them, I wanted to compare only the dry against dry. So that means setting 1 and setting 5 line up well. Setting 1 is a 4x12 Marshall type cab on both of these. And setting 5 is like a Fender Champ cab. And to keep it real, I'm also going to compare them against a real cab that I have here in my studio. So I don't have a Marshall 4x12, but I do have a 2x12. So I'm going to EQ it to kind of make it sound like a 4x12. Then for setting 5, that's setting 1. For setting 5, I don't have a Fender cab, a Fender Champ cab, but I have this little Vox 1x12 cab with a small enclosure that sounds very Champ-like. And I'm going to roll off a little of the low end to give you the Fender Champ cab sound. So hopefully that's a like-to-like comparison. And if there's anything else I forgot to mention, I'll tell you later. All right, enjoy the shootout. So, what'd you think? Were they close? I thought they were pretty close. I thought that the OX box had a little more girth, a little more low end to it, and the OX Stomp was a little thinner, a little in the nasally department. Both sounded great. I also think that the Stomp here is going to depend on what load box you use. The first time around, I recorded this with the Weber Mass 100. Yeah, the Mini Mass 100 watt attenuator. And that has a load box in the back. I went line out into this, and everything sounded shrill and thin and clearer, more higher definition, but really harsh on the ear. So I redid it all using the Torpedo Captor 8 as the load box, and that improved the sound a lot more. But it compressed it a little bit more. So I imagine that it's going to matter which load box you guys have in your, arsenal. But I really thought that the OX box had more girth to it and more beef and more closely resembled a real cabinet. Now, as for the room sounds, this was weird. I had the room knob off on everything I played through the OX box, and yet you could really hear the room sound effect in the preset. While with the Stomp, I didn't touch the room setting at all. I just left whatever the preset had mixed in. I didn't roll it off or anything. I left everything at noon. As you can see, everything was left at noon. So this had less room sound than the OX box, even though I had the room knob off on the OX box. So, and I, in my real cabs, they were in a closet, and so I basically used a little bit of my Valhalla reverb, and I used the room setting there, and I added a little bit to the Stomp, and I added a little to the real speaker cabs, so that the room sounds were sort of balanced between all three. I hope it didn't affect the comparison too much, and I hope you enjoyed this shootout. So please check out my channel for more shootouts. I got a bunch that I made this winter, and I got a bunch more coming. All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a good one. Wow.